Okay, we're hit one last topic. It's going to be short. And honestly, after that, after hearing that interview, this last topic may seem kind of light, but I will tie it back to what we're hearing from Trevor Loudon. Again, if you're listening to this and you heard that interview, what I urge you to do, you can go to our YouTube page. It'll be up by tomorrow. Our YouTube page is just americacanwetalk.org, and it's just a very simple. Put in America Can We Talk. It comes up. You can find my YouTube channel. All the interviews are lined up easily on the YouTube page. You can grab the URL for this interview you just heard with Trevor Loudon. Share it with your 1,000 best friends. Share it around this country. What he did and his ability to put the research together and to tell us what we're facing in the 2020 election could not be more important. I beg you to share it with everyone, including your very nice, rational Democrat friends who vote Democrat because they think more like John F. Kennedy. They're thinking like that, or they're thinking that they don't like Trump's hair color or hairstyle or tweets or whatever it is they don't like. Share that interview. Get it around this country. Okay, last quick topic, and it's a little bit lighthearted. I'll tie it back to what Trevor was saying. So yesterday, or 2 days ago, I guess, in the Senate Judiciary Committee, as you know, the senators are reviewing the nomination by President Trump of Amy Coney Barrett, nominated her to serve in the Supreme Court. And so the Democrats are just trying to nitpick and hassle and trying to find something that they can hang on her to give her the label to call her, because she's actually among the most stellar, really, of my lifetime, stellar, qualified candidates to be on the Supreme Court. So she made reference to, in some answer to some question, she used the expression sexual preference, which, as you might recognize, is a very commonly used expression by people on the radical left, on the American left, the LGBTQ advocates. It's a very commonly used expression, sexual preference. Little did Amy Coney Barrett know that somehow the thought police, the language police in our country, have now decided that sexual preference, the term sexual preference, is offensive. It's now not okay. Not allowed to say that anymore. You can't say sexual of preference. You have to say sexual orientation, because preference might imply that it's a choice or a person's indecisive and denies the leftist attempt to have sexual orientation be your actual identity. But, so one of the senators got in her case right away and said, Ms. Barrett, Judge Barrett, this is a very deeply offensive. You're not allowed to say sexual preference, blah, blah, blah. And she says the term, this was actually this crazy senator from Hawaii, Senator Mazie Hirono, scolding Amy Coney Barrett, saying sexual preference is offensive and outdated. To which Barrett says, okay, I'm sorry, I meant no offense. I don't ever discriminate against any group. I meant no offense by the use of that term. Why I'm telling you this is, if you think that there's just not an orchestrated army of people out there immediately willing to jump on the latest bandwagon political correctness, Webster's Online Dictionary. Webster's Online Dictionary, a place you think certainly should be free of politics. It's just a dictionary. It tells you what terms mean. So they previously, the day before this testimony, the word preference had a definition in the Webster's Online Dictionary, and the fifth definition in preference this is Webster's language, under preference, the fifth choice of definition was orientation, as in sexual preference. And the same day, after Senator Hirono scolds Amy Coney Barrett, says you're not allowed to say preference in relation to sexual orientation, that's offensive and outdated, Webster's changed the definition in their online dictionary. Same thing, they have the word preference, they're down the fifth definition, just like it was before, have the word preference, although it is preceded by the words offensive. It is offensive if used in the context of sexual preference. So Webster salutes to the radical left, Senator Hirono, LGBTQ advocacy, found something to criticize this candidate for the Supreme Court because she used the word preference, which, as this one article, if you read or go to our website and read, americacanwetalk.org, on our website, you can read this article. It goes through example after example after example of prominent leftists in this country who've used the term sexual preference, including Ruth Bader Ginsburg, whose empty seat on the Supreme Court, Amy Coney Barrett, will soon be filling. But you had Ruth Bader Ginsburg, you have all sorts of media outlets, the mainstream media outlets, CNN, NBC, all of them have used the term sexual preference because it was a commonly used term, not only not offensive, viewed as respectful as, well, it's your preference, it's your choice, it's your decision. We respect your preference in the arena of sexual orientation. It was used previously as in ways intended to be respectful of the right of an individual to define their own sexual identity. But it's not really this story I'm telling you, in my view, for this show, is not about whether sexual preference is an okay term to use. It's recognizing how quickly the language police can pounce. Senator Hirano piles on Amy Coney Barrett, scolds her for using the term sexual preference, and Webster's Online Dictionary within hours is changing the definition to say, oh, by the way, it's offensive if you say sexual preference. That's offensive. It wasn't offensive, 10 hours earlier, but now it is, because Hirano has said that in the floor of the Senate as they are reviewing the nomination of Amy Coney Barrett. Looping this back to the story we just talked about a moment ago, that interview with Trevor Loudon, one of the most extraordinary, important interviews ever done on this show. Important points he's making about the decision we have to face. This kind of thing, I want you to recognize Democrats do these kind of things, like Senator Hirano talking about you can't say the word sexual preference, that's offensive. They do those things not because they in the slightest care about the LGBT community, about whether the term preference should be considered offensive, about whether anyone's offended. All they're doing is trying to score cheap political points, hoping they can be seen as virtue signaling supporters of the LGBTQ agenda. Maybe they score a point or two with someone who might feel sensitive to the LGBTQ agenda. So if they can signal they're sensitive too, they're in fact downright outraged over the word preference. This is how petty, how inconsequential, how absurd the Democrat Party is in this country. That's where they go to make political points about whether a term that was up until 24 hours ago, 48 hours ago, perfectly acceptable, used by everyone, but all of a sudden, because they found a way to make it offensive, a way to insult Amy Coney Barrett, a way to take some credit away from her, they turn it into a language police issue because they think they make political points on it. They think they maybe win votes, and they're virtue signaling their unique sensitivities. And in the scope, in the grand scheme of what we face in this country in the 2020 elections, to think this fool, Senator Hirano, that's the most important thing she can think about, that's how she scores political points, when the entire 2020 election is whether or not we're going to save this country, save the Constitution, save our freedom, or have the country go over the cliff to socialism, Marxism, and communism. And this is the high point of Hirano's thinking, is I'd like to find offense taken to a new word. People, this interview, as I said a moment ago, this interview with Trevor Loudon, probably the most important interview I've ever done on this show, ever done. It matters more than I can say in words for you to take the time and have the bravery to share that interview, not just with your Republican friends, but with your Republican wobbly friends, with your anti-Trumper friends, with your Democrat friends. Understand that, as he said, 80% of Democrats in this country, they might be voting Democrat because they are, whatever their reasons are, because they like John F. Kennedy, because they like the little guy, because they like unions, or whatever reason they have no idea they're voting for the permanent destruction of America. That's what they're voting for in this time, given the socialist, communist, Marxist influence of the Chinese Communist Party and the movements all over this country, organizations funded and in some way ideologically connected with radical communism. Those groups are now in charge of the Democrat Party, and they're going to be running this country if you have a Biden victory. which is not going to happen, by the way, friends. We're going to have a Trump victory. We have to power through the next 3 weeks. We have to share what we know, everything good that Trump has done, whether it's the interview from yesterday where you understood from a doctor actually working with President Trump to develop policy. You have to have an understanding of what is at stake in this country and then share it with everyone. This election matters more than any other election in all of American history.